Hello and welcome to Casually Criterion. My name is Chris.
And my name is Justin. Casually Criterion is a weekly podcast where Chris and I are watching a film from the Criterion Collection each week, and we started at spine number 1 and going forward from there.
Today's episode, spine number 6, Beauty and the Beast by Jean Cocteau.
Yep, and just a reminder, if you want to follow along with the podcast, you can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/casuallycriterion podcast. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Casual Criterion. You can also email us at casuallycriterion@gmail.com. And don't forget to review us on iTunes.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have any questions for the upcoming film or any thoughts on this podcast, just send them in. We will definitely address them.
Yeah, and I don't know how well this is showing up, but just FYI, it is raining outside. There's a little bit of thunder. We don't have like a soundproof setup or anything like that keeps that noise out, so I apologize if it's distracting, but it's actually kind of nice.
Yeah, I think enjoy the ambiance, get some Coco, start a fire, and listen to the podcast.
It's just a little mood rain for today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we get into the movie, as usual, Chris and I like to talk a little bit about different movie news things or subjects that are on our brains each week. So, Chris, what do you got?
So this week, Infinity Wars, the trailer for it came out, and I thought it looked pretty fun. It's definitely not a movie that you're going to walk away from with lots of deep thoughts, but it looked like a fun movie.
You're selling that movie short already, and you haven't even seen it.
I'm just saying. Well, maybe it is, but from my experience with the movies, is like all the Marvel movies, is they're fun movies for the most part. I enjoy them. They're like a little snack. They're like a guilty pleasure, I guess. Yeah. What do you think? What did you think about the trailer?
I thought the trailer looked like a superhero movie trailer. There's nothing in it that surprised me. When I say surprised me, there was nothing in it that surprised me from like a visual perspective or anything different mood-wise than I would have expected. Like there is like, I guess, surprising things in like the end of the trailer, like the Guardians of the Galaxy crew are there, so apparently they're going to get involved now. Actually, have they been involved before? It didn't seem like it based on the trailer.
No, this would be the first time that they're mixed up with everybody else.
There is so much thunder. That thunder was more surprising than anything in the Infinity Wars trailer. I was thinking while watching the trailer, I was like, there's so many characters in this film that like, are these turning into like ensemble films where we have like an entire cast of characters? Like, are these films getting more and more Altman-esque?
Yeah, it's shortcuts, except for superheroes.
Yeah. Are there too many?
So that was always a fear. So I think what they actually did really well is the fact that each of those characters gets their own movie. So you get that character development in its own movie, right? So you don't have to do that character development in the big movie, right? You already understand, like if you're watching all of them, you already understand who this person is, and you don't necessarily need all those characters to have character development. Like X-Men, for instance, is one where there's just a ton of characters in it, and you get to know a couple of them. Like I think X-Men would make a much better TV show. Each character could have their own episode, or
right.
You could get to know them better. And I think that that's kind of what they've done here is they've made a TV show out of superhero movies where there's 2 episodes a year, and the BBC actually kind of does that, like with Sherlock or their TV shows. Like you have 1 or 2 episodes, but they're hour and a half length. You know.
Yeah, but Sherlock is a show about
2 people.
Two, I guess maybe 3, 4 people.
2
at
main
most.
characters, yeah.
Doing that is okay. And I guess if we're thinking about it in terms of a TV show, do you expect at some point, or maybe we're at that point, or maybe it's going to be in the future, maybe if the superhero bubble ever bursts and they become, or we stop making them for some reason, like maybe looking back, but do you think that you'll look on the superhero movie or the Marvel Cinematic Universe as like something that's great as a whole? Like you look at TV shows like, I know we both love Lost, right? And I consider Lost like a really amazing,
Mm-hmm.
but episode by episode, there's a few like standout episodes that are really great, but not every episode is as great to me as like considering the whole thing and having seen the whole thing.
Yeah, okay, I can see that, and that definitely is true. There are some duds in the Marvel, and specifically Marvel. There are some duds in there because I feel like all of the DC ones, except for Wonder Woman, aren't very good. But there are some duds, and they all kind of start to feel, even though there's other directors, they all kind of start to look and feel the same until like Guardians of the Galaxy and the new Thor feels very different from the other ones. And I think the Avengers are like the climax of a season, you know, like the final episode of that season. And then that's what they call them. It's like, so before the first Avengers, it was phase 1 and then phase 2. We're in phase 3 right now. Just Marvel. That's
okay.
Yeah, that's and the nerds.
Okay.
Which I guess
because I didn't remember. I was like, I don't remember seeing anything about phases in any of these movies or trailers. But I guess it's like a
that's just what they talk about in
season 1, season 2 type thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, that looking at it that way, it makes sense because season 1 is they've introduced all the characters. Season 2, you know, like they deal with stuff from the first season. It's almost like acts, and this one is probably going to end a lot of the traditional ones we've had for the last 10 years, and we'll move into new superheroes.
Yeah, but at what point are you watching stuff that's just okay to add up to like this bigger thing? At what point does that become taxing for you? Like for me, I'll just go ahead and say that I've been kind of tapped out and fatigued on superhero movies for years and years. Like the last one that I saw in theaters, I saw Guardians of the Galaxy in theaters because that kind of seemed like something new and different, and I had some friends that wanted me to see it. But the last one I saw before that was Avengers, the first one. Like I never saw 2. I finally watched Captain America Winter Soldier. That was the second Captain America, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I finally watched Winter Soldier after one of my friends, like, just like every day I was like, have you watched it yet? Have you watched it yet? And so I rented it at home and watched it at home. Like I didn't go see it. But I've been fatigued for, what's that, 6 years?
Yeah.
Something I've just
like
been
that.
over them.
Yeah, and I could see that. I don't feel that way, and I think most of the movie-going public doesn't feel that way. I think at some point there may be a superhero bubble burst, but I think they're going to have to make, 2 or 3 really bad movies. I mean, we see DC struggling. Justice League did not do what they thought it was going to do. I think it's because they made 3 or 4 really bad movies, and people stopped going to see it. So it's going to take, 2 or 3 bad ones. And as to your point about the mediocrity, now I don't think none of these movies are exceptional, except for maybe 1 or 2 of them. They're good, and I enjoy going to see them, and I look forward to the next one.
Yeah. I guess something that I think about is how great or how high is the potential high of like a superhero movie. Like you go and you don't know if it's going to be good, you don't know if it's going to be bad, but like it feels to me like they're only going to be so good, like at least based so far. Like I haven't seen one that's just a great movie with the exception of like The Dark Knight. There's been movies that have been good, but like they only hit like a certain level. And they kind of, on the other end of the spectrum, they only hit a certain level of being bad. It's almost like you don't get very low lows and you don't get very high highs with superhero movies for me. Yeah. And so it's almost not worth the like going to spend my money and risk on seeing something that I know is never going to get above a certain level.
It can't get above a 7. I think partially because they want to make it as appealing to everybody as possible. They're spending so much money. They want to make as much money as possible. So sometimes creativity is reined in, and they can't do exactly what they want to do. I think a good example of that is Ant-Man. That was supposed to be directed by Edgar Wright, and because Edgar Wright probably had his own ideas, and was unwilling to go the way of the studio, they eventually had to part ways. And I think I would have loved to have seen Edgar Wright's Ant-Man. I enjoyed the Ant-Man that came out. You're right. You can either succeed only so far. Like, whereas, say Edgar Wright had had his opportunity to make Ant-Man. It could have been a 10. But it also could have been a 1. And that's not a chance that they're willing to take. They'd rather be in between 4 and 7.
So have you seen Community?
Yes.
The situation reminds me of when they're trying to create the mascot for the community college.
Yes.
And they try to make it like as unoffensive and like as generally accessible of a person, because their mascot they're the human beings, right?
Yeah.
And so they're trying to make a human, but they don't want to make it white or black or Asian or like a man or a woman or any of these things. So they just end up with this like gray like thing with like almost like a smiley face drawn on the face, because they don't want to get too into like
one way or the other.
Special like feature about the face, so they have a blank face. So we end up with just this stupid mascot that's not anything. But that's what that reminds me of.
Yeah.
That's what's going on, I think.
Well, I do think that there are movies. I would say that the superhero movies are becoming more inclusive, with Wonder Woman and Black Panther coming up.
Well, I don't mean in the racial diversity sense. I mean that like they're boiling down their film to like the most common denominator, and they end up with something bland and uninteresting. It's like that has no special defining features in their films.
Right. We want as many people to like this as possible. Yeah, I think that's kind of what's going on.
I just always question when and if it's gonna fatigue and what it's gonna take. I guess you said that it takes like a few bad movies, but what I'm concerned about is that the movies are never really that bad. Like, you claim that the DC universe made bad movies, right? And I didn't see Batman vs Superman, I didn't see Wonder Woman, but I did see Man of Steel, and like people kind of railroaded that movie. I thought it wasn't very good. Like, 'cause that's one of the ones that's bad, right?
It's one of the better ones out of the DC ones, but I don't think it's very good.
I haven't seen other ones. Yeah, people don't think it's very good, but like for me, like if I were to rate that film, I would give it a 5 out of 10 because it just was completely like middle of the road. Didn't do anything for me. I didn't hate it. I didn't like it. I didn't even dislike it. It was just nothing. Like, it was just completely middle of the road for me. And so, to me, I guess like when it says like they have to make bad films, or they're going to hit some bad films, and it's like, to me, I don't know if that's possible because they're not doing anything enough to make a bad film.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So you just feel nonplussed about the whole thing. An issue is, when you watch Lost, maybe there was 2 or 3 bad episodes in a row, or 5s, on our chart. But then you would hit that 4th episode was an 8, and you just kind of wanted to get back to that 8. It varies all the time, right, in a TV show. So I think the same thing's happening here. Now, you're right. It may not ever get past a 7. It may never go below a 4, but you're looking for that 7, that really good one, or like these great moments that happen in it.
Final thought: I just don't want to spend my time or money chasing a 7 out of 10.
And that makes sense.
That's kind of where I fall on it, and that doesn't mean that I'm right and ultimately for everybody, but that's my final thought.
And my final thought is, sometimes when you put them together, maybe it's a little bit more than a 7. I don't know. There's good moments in there that are
collectively
higher than
as a
7.
whole, sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I'll do mine, which is kind of silly. I was just looking up, different movie news over the weekend, and I just found it really interesting. The film Coco, the Pixar film that's come out, with the release of it, before the film plays, they have a short based on Frozen, and it's got the snowman from Frozen on it, and he's kind of the main character of this.
Olaf.
The news over the weekend is that after basically everybody, from what I can tell, has complained about this short being before Coco, Disney is planning to like pull the short, or it's not going to play in front of Coco anymore. Like, I think like starting next week, starting like a week from now.
Oh, well, it'd be tomorrow, because they're going to hear this on Thursday.
Oh yeah.
Time travel.
Yeah. Anyways, I think it's December 8th is like the last day. However far that is from the time that you're listening. Maybe it's in the past.
Yeah.
I don't know. I also read that this was a planned thing, and I'm not so sure how much of that's true, like that they had initially planned to pull it on December 8th no matter what. So I don't know that it's true that like all of this backlash has forced Disney to pull it off, but I think regardless, the backlash is important because it's obviously made like a splash, and like because Disney has come out and commented and say we're not pulling it because of this backlash, we're pulling it because we'd always planned to, but like it's obviously that story and that backlash is getting to Disney, right? And we're kind of backtracking a little bit to like the superhero movie thing, but myself and I think other people who are disenfranchised with like superhero movies, like it gives me hope that as an audience, I can that we can maybe make enough of a fuss about like getting X number of superhero movies a year and not getting like, or not even superhero movies, but stuff that's based on other things like a new Jumanji film, another Star Wars film, Blade Runner, which is based on other things that like live action remakes of Disney films like Beauty and the Beast and whatever the one that's coming out. The next one is, I can't remember. Jungle Book. No, they did Jungle Book already.
Lion King,
yeah. So like maybe we can just make enough of a fuss to like have an effect and get a more original content.
Don't you think though that those movies allow the smaller movies to be made? So you make live action Jungle Book and that makes a surplus of money, so now they have money that they can spend on a smaller one and not have to worry about, or like their smaller movies can break even and they don't have to worry about those movies
because they're making enough profit
from the other ones. So that kind of supplements the independent branch of those studios.
Maybe so.
Right.
It gives me hope that I guess like we have an ability to affect things for what's the people want as a mass. And I'm not saying that people want superhero movies gone in mass, but like if it ever did get to that point, that we might be able to, as consumers, affect things by complaining and.
Right. I mean, just to the Olaf sequence that happened before Coco, I think that was just a mistake. Like Pixar has almost all of theirs. Like I may not love it, whatever comes before it, but I'm always excited to see it.
Yeah, they always have something before their films.
Yeah, like a little short cartoon, and they're always fun. And they're usually a little bit shorter than this. This is 22 minutes long.
Yeah, I think that's the big point about it. Like,
yeah,
I think the longest one prior to this was 10 minutes, but most are around 5, maybe 6 minutes.
And I think it was just and it's basically an advertisement for Frozen 2 coming out in 2019. And so it's just kind of like where these little shorts were just these little creative bursts of genius, and you could watch it and enjoy it.
Well, they were original.
And an original
usually,
idea.
Like they weren't.
I mean, sometimes like we had Toy Story. There was a Toy Story one before one of them, but they were fun and enjoyable. And yeah, this is just a misstep. They made a mistake by putting this in front of it.
Yeah, I think.
And I haven't seen it, so I can't speak to the quality of it. I mean, everybody seems to dislike it, but
yeah. I think we can't talk about the quality of it because we haven't seen it, but it just feels like a misstep to me to put something that long in front of your film. I mean, I've read stories that people have gone back out to the theater, like ticket stand, and be like, I think I bought a ticket to the wrong movie because there's it's this Frozen snowman thing, and not Coco. So like you're causing confusion, but also like based on my experience, and this is me going to like film festivals and stuff, and I go see a feature film, and some of the ones that I've been to will program a short to play before a feature. They'll play like alongside, like maybe they have like thematic similarities or genre similarities, but the most successful ones of those that I've been to are when they program like one short and it's really short, like 5-6 minutes, like maybe 10 minutes at most. At one of the film festivals I went to recently, I saw a film that had 2 shorts playing before it, and each one was like 15 to 20 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. And at that point, even just before the first short was over, I was ready to watch the film, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, think about watching trailers. Like, at a certain point, you get sick of seeing trailers, and you're like,
what movie am I watching again?
When is this going to start? How long has this been? And undoubtedly, there are trailers before.
Yeah,
even
I imagine
this
so.
short plays before Coco. So, like, I think it's just a mistake to ask an audience to sit there and watch something that's not what they paid for that long.
Now, you could do something like this on a struggling movie, like a movie that you're not sure is going to do that well, and so you stick, go see this movie, and you get to see Olaf's adventure as well,
Sure.
Whereas in this, the Coco doesn't need it, or maybe they thought it did, but I don't. It's Pixar. I don't think that it does.
Yeah. Do you think that Pixar might be getting a little too, like, confident of, like, we can put out whatever we want and people will love it because we're Pixar and we've had a good track record so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think Pixar's kind of missed.
Getting a big head.
Yeah, but they've missed the mark. They haven't been as they had a strong run there, like when they first came out, and I don't think they've quite lived up to it post like Cars 2. I mean, Toy Story 3 was really good. Cars wasn't super great. In Cars 2, I didn't even watch, but I hear it's not very good. So like, The Good Dinosaur wasn't very good, which I haven't seen, but that's also what I've heard.
Yeah.
So maybe they thought that this wasn't going to do as well. So we'll see.
It's just an interesting choice to do that, and it's interesting seeing the backlash and seeing the effect and the attention that the backlash has gathered. I just think it's worth reading about.
Yeah, and the internet never overreacts to anything. It's it's pretty calm.
Yeah. It's a reasoned, thoughtful arguments always.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Beauty and the Beast. Okay, Beauty and the Beast. It is a French film from 1946. It was directed by French filmmaker and artist Jean Cocteau. It is the story of Beauty and the Beast, the one that I'm sure most people know. There's a girl named Belle. She ends up going to the castle of this beast creature and starts to live with him, and she's kind of held hostage, I would say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like held against her will, but she ends up falling in love with the beast.
Stockholm Syndrome
style. Yeah, and then in the end, when she's fully in love with the beast, he transforms into a man, and they maybe live happily forever after. Whatever. That's the fairy tale story, and that's like the base plot line for this movie. Yeah. So, Chris, you want to tell them about Jean Cocteau a little bit?
Yeah, there's a couple interesting things, maybe some familiar patterns. Well, on a tragic note, his father, when he was about 9, committed suicide, and he was raised by his mother and maternal grandfather. So some tragedy there. And of course, when they made this movie, they had just come out of World War II. So most everybody had suffered some type of tragedy living in France at that time.
Yeah, which I think it does provide some interesting context to the film, which we'll get to.
Mm-hmm.
But as you said, familiar patterns. Jean Cocteau was a painter. He also did lots of other like artistic ventures. He wrote poetry. He wrote novels, plays. I saw something that he had designed some posters, and I think I read something that he had maybe even created some music for like an opera or something like that.
I have a question. Do you think one of the reasons all these directors, especially of this around this time period, were painters or dabbled in other art? Do you think it was because, I mean, film was so new. In 1946, it wasn't super new, but like it was just coming into its form as art, So these other artists they'd already started off as doing other art, and they moved into this new form of art and dabbled in that. Do you think that may be because most of the ones that we've seen that are part of this pattern are around this time period or a little bit earlier?
Yeah, I think it's something where film was getting established and was becoming an art form, and these artists were interested in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, when films started, like the first films that were just like the train pulling in the station by like the Lumiere brothers, or the people leaving the factory and that sort of thing. Like, people kind of thought it was a fun novelty. They're like, oh, this is cool, but
Right.
that's it. What are you going to do with it?
And it
Like, they
wasn't
never
necessarily-
saw what it was going to be. And then I think an extension of that is that film slowly started to become an art form, and at this time it's still in that early stages of becoming and recognized as an art form, and not just novelty entertainment in film.
Recognized being the important thing, like people started realizing the potential for it, I suppose.
Yeah, I think we can look back in hindsight and pick out films that are very interesting from an art perspective, but as you said, recognized. Like, getting the acknowledgement of being art wasn't worldwide, I guess, or wasn't common thought.
Yeah.
Cocteau was part of the like avant-garde art movement. And are you familiar with avant-garde?
Yes, but let's go over it.
Sure, yeah. Well, like, avant-garde is basically being at the forefront of movement of art, and that's at least to my understanding of it. I'm not an expert in avant-garde art or the definition of it, I guess, but like, basically you're ahead of the curve. Like, you're doing new things before anyone else.
See this movie as being part of that.
yeah, and it's definitely something that's harder and harder to do these days, as like there's so many people and there's so much connection throughout the world. It's tough to be an avant-garde artist because, one, so many things have been done, but two, like, somebody else is probably doing it somewhere else, and it's difficult to say where things originated, right?
Right.
But I think that's important to know that he was an avant-garde artist. He was like ahead of his time and doing new things that people hadn't thought of before with his art. And I think that goes for his films as well. So he made his first film, which was The Blood of a Poet, in 1932. And then he didn't make another film at all, like no short films, nothing, for 14 years. His next film was Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, definitely one of those reasons. I mean, not the whole 14 years is a long time, but I would imagine one of those reasons is World War II.
Yeah, for sure. And I assume he was doing plenty of other like artistic endeavors during that time. Right. But
there's also a really interesting. I haven't read it. I read some excerpts in research, but a diary that he wrote while he was making this film. That I think if you want to delve further into the making of this film, that would be a really interesting read.
Yeah, and I wish I had known that before.
Yeah.
Because I've been a fan of this film for a while. This is my third time to see it.
Wow.
I believe it was your first.
It was my first time.
Yeah, and I think the film's great, and I would have ordered this book forever ago had I known, but I was doing my research for this episode, I discovered that the book existed, and I think it would have actually been a pretty good book to read doing research for this episode. So it's a shame, but maybe next time, maybe when we finish the podcast, maybe we'll just start back at one again, and then
in 18
and I'll know
years.
Then. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So do you want to talk about production?
Well, so the cinematographer was Henry Alekin. He also did Wings of Desire and Roman Holiday.
But it wanted to be a big time.
Yeah, but there's some clashing that they did. Henry and Cocteau did on set. And then eventually, I think Henry came along to, but they had different visions for what they wanted the film to be.
Obviously, Henry is, or is it Henri? I think it might actually be Henri in French, but it doesn't matter. I'll just say Henry. Henry is obviously a very talented guy. Wings of Desire is a beautiful movie. Roman Holiday looks great. He did plenty of other films. And so when you have like two great artists like that working on a thing, I think there is that potential to butt heads on ideas.
Yeah. So we've already mentioned this, but the film was made just after World War II. That caused a lot of difficulties, like the scene with the laundry scene where they have all those sheets out in the open, and they had a really hard time finding sheets like that without patches, because there was a shortage of cloth. Which I find really interesting. And even on top of that, there was Belle's sheets from her room in the Beast Castle kept on getting stolen.
So it's just like the scarcity of some of these things that they were using to make the film. And That even goes down to the actual film and film stocks and their film equipment. Like they had damaged cameras, damaged lenses.
The film stock, every time they got it, was different. It was a different kind of film.
I mean, they were really like piecing all of the stuff together through like basically like the remnants of World War II.
Which is really interesting because not only on a technical level is this movie amazing, but it's also amazing that it even got made like on both those levels, because technically it's so brilliant, and then they just, the logistics of making it
just finishing the film, like it's impressive that they finished it and did it to the scale, but then that it is so good, and not all of those flaws really show through. And that may partially be down to Criterion's restoration of it. I don't think there's any sort of special feature that shows like what they've done to like help fix the film, but there are like other films where they detail like how they fix scratches and damaged spots in films.
And you can tell that there's frames missing from this one. Even so, it would jump. Cocteau fell ill, like he got sick. And
while they were shooting.
Yeah, and he had to be hospitalized. And Rene Clement, who was the technical advisor, he took over and helped out. And Clement went on to make a bunch of really good movies as well.
Yeah, Forbidden Games, which is on Criterion. And then another issue that they ran into is that they were filming for one of their locations was next to a flight school. And
an army flight school.
A military flight school. So
I guess it wouldn't be army.
There were so you have like planes taking off and landing and flying by, and even a plane just flying by, as we've learned recording this podcast
today, in fact.
External noise can be a problem. If you still hear the rain. It's because it's still happening. But also, when I was making my film, it's like you've got to hold, like you can't shoot if you're recording sound if there's a train going by nearby blowing its horn, if there's a plane going by overhead, if a loud truck drives by on the street near you. Sound is like super important and kind of one of the most frustrating things on a production is to get sound right, because you're constantly having to hold, and you have your sound recorder monitoring the sound, and they can hear everything better than you can, right? Because like as humans, our brains are designed to kind of level out sound, which is a really weird thing, and maybe this whole other discussion, but like a microphone does not have the brain to do that. It picks up the sound as it is.
You hear everything.
And this is why like when you're riding in a car with somebody on a noisy highway, you can still talk and have a conversation because your brain filters out that road noise. But if you stuck a mic and tried to record that conversation, you're kind of shocked when you hear it back and be like, what? The road was that loud? I didn't even notice, right? But anyway, so that was an issue for them, something that like held up production. And the makeup is another thing that is impressive to me, that they, with all of these other problems dealing with the makeup for the Beast, it's like it supposedly took 5 hours for him to get that costume on.
That's one thing we haven't been able to shorten, with all our technology. It's still, like for those actors that, have to put on full body costumes, it still takes a long time. Yeah,
and I just think that's super interesting, thinking about making a film, and like part of your day has to be this like X number of hours that someone has to put makeup on. I was really kind of like enamored watching the special features that come with like the Hobbit film, because all of them, like every actor had to go through that makeup to get like their Hobbit stuff on like every day.
Right. And
they're pretty much like all in all of the scenes together for the most part. So, and I think there's like 13 of them, but anyways, that's always impressive.
Yeah.
To me, and especially at this time, and probably, again, they were struggling with supplies for that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just move into the film, and starting with the beginning of the film, I want to talk about like the credit sequence and that sort of like opening disclaimer note.
Opening crawl.
Thing. Yeah, opening crawl. But first of all, the opening credit sequence was like written on a chalkboard and like chalk writing, and then it was just being erased, which was interesting to me because it has nothing to do with the film itself. Like there's no chalkboards or chalk. It's anachronistic, right? Like it doesn't belong in the time period that the movie's filmed, like a chalkboard and chalk and writing.
Oh yeah, it's outside of the movie. It felt to me like it was school, maybe just because of the chalkboard, but felt like this was a story I was being told in school because of the chalkboard and I mean, I'm not sure that that's his intention, but that's what I felt like when I watched it because of the chalkboard and the chalk. It was interesting and kind of a cool opening, I thought.
Last week we talked about 400 blows, and I was reading a lot into the credit sequence. I tried to do the same thing here, but I'm not sure that I could. I'm wondering if it just comes from his like art background of being like avant-garde in the sense of like
trying something new.
Yeah, we're trying like, well, it doesn't matter that this film is set in like whatever time it's set in, like early, like 1400s, 1500s, 1600s,
Was it
maybe
him?
even earlier than that. But we have this like modern chalk opening credit sequence just to do it, really.
Right. Did he actually write on the chalkboard, or he was part of that, right? Or he was erasing? Because there's two people, I think.
Probably so. I don't know if it was him or not. It could have been anybody. Could have been actors who are professionals at writing on chalkboards and erasing, but I don't know. But so yeah, we can move to the opening crawl. Is this whole rant that's basically
it's breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah.
He's asking the audience, look, I'm going to present these fantasy elements to you. Be like a child and believe in it like a child would.
Kind of preparing you that like, yes, this is like fantasy. It's fantastical. It's like there are things that aren't necessarily explained from a logical sense or that don't make sense logically. And it just says, just go with it. And I mean, how did you feel about that? Do you think that helped you when you watched the film?
So what I would say, whenever you watch a movie, like you're kind of making a contract with whoever's presenting the movie to you, and for me, it's like take me on this journey. It doesn't matter whether it's fantasy or whatever. Like basically, every time I go see a movie, this is the way I walk into it. Like I have an open mind. You can show me whatever you want, and I'll go along with it as long as what you present to me is logical and makes sense or makes me feel something emotional. So I feel like maybe at the time it was needed, but like this is what I do every time I go see a movie. Is I put my faith in the director or the filmmaker.
Yeah, well, you said that you're with it as long as he presents things to you logically. And do you think that he's worried or anything like that about the film being like too out there and not making sense? Or
well, I think at the time, yeah, I think that this movie was very avant-garde, and so he was presenting things that people hadn't necessarily seen in the movies before, and so that's why he was worried and put this on there, because he was worried about how it would come across and how the audience would react.
My thought when it comes to art or film, at least when I was in film school and taking art classes and we had to do like critique days where we'd have to look at everyone's work or project and critique them. I was irked whenever someone would stand up and give it like a disclaimer about their project or their work and would tell us what it means or like how to look at it and what to think about, right? Like that always kind of irked me. And it does a little bit in this movie. Like I don't know what it's like to watch the film without having read this. So I don't get my chance to watch the film through my own eyes. It's now my experience is tainted, right?
Yeah, I think another thing though is you don't get to watch the movie in the time that it was released. So the opening crawl may have actually helped you enjoy the movie more when it was first released, But you're right. Like now, we don't need it, and it's part of the movie, so absolutely it should still be there.
Well,
But
I don't even want to say that we don't need it, because I think what it says is important, because he's inviting you to become a child again, which is maybe something that films do altogether, because as we get older, we know more and more about film and understand the process that it's actors, and as a kid, you don't quite understand that. So maybe in a sense, all films are doing that, but with this one in particular, because it's a fairy tale and there's so much in it, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit later, but I don't think there's that much development of the love between Belle and the Beast, right? And maybe we'll just get into it now.
Yeah.
But he doesn't really do a great job of making me believe or see why she's fallen in love with him. We don't really have that relationship development in the film, but when I think to like fairy tales and like Cinderella, for example, she's at the ball, she dances with the prince, and like
they're in love.
They're in love, and that's, as a kid, you're like, oh, they're in love. Like you don't necessarily need that. And I think just based on that alone, like without this thing telling me like be a kid, look at this in a child, like I might not have bought that she was in love with it. Like I was like, I don't understand why she's in love with this thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, except for that, I know the story. I knew that these are archetypes of characters, and we know, like, besides having seen Beauty and the Beast in other forms, we know where these characters are going to go. We know that the girl is going to fall in love with the Beast, you know, like, just automatically. So you can kind of skip over some of that, you know, like the plot development, you know. But that's certainly not what this movie's necessarily about. It's not about the plot of it.
Yeah, the plot is the least interesting thing going on in the movie. But yeah, we can move on.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I didn't think we would talk that much about it, but you're right. It is interesting how you present your movie and set it up.
It just shapes the whole thing for like better or worse, and it's worth considering and talking about whether or not that's good.
Yeah.
So yeah, we start the film with Belle and her family, and I think just her family is really interesting because they all seem so angry.
Well, they're all
bitter.
Yeah. Everybody, but the dad even seems bitter. Like he's lost his fortune. They're destitute essentially, and the only person that's willing to help out, of course, is Belle. You know, because she's got the most pure heart. The rest of the family is unwilling to. This
is turning into a bit of a theme, but like I was reminded of Arrested Development watching it, because their family's just so awful and like full of themselves, and obviously so is the Bluths in Arrested Development, and it's just like I had that same sense of like these are all the worst people. Unlike Arrested Development, they have no redeeming qualities, and they're not likable or even funny.
They're funny.
Are they funny?
I think.
Okay.
I mean, like the brother. I think the interaction between the brother and the evil sisters is pretty funny. Or like the sequence where they they have to rub onions on their eyes to make her cry.
That's okay. Yeah, that's funny. I agree.
So I mean, it is comic. There's no redeeming qualities to him, and like the brother yells like, I hope that the devil himself throws his dung on you, or something along those lines. And I thought that was so hilarious.
Yeah, it's pretty crass, and they're a pretty ridiculous thing to say, and I think they are probably a bit over the top in like how terrible they are.
They're over the top and very mean to her. She's the only one that's pure of heart. The dad maybe is like halfway good. So there's this one shot in this opening sequence that I really enjoyed. So the sisters have gotten all gussied up, and the palanquins, the things that they get carried on. There's a really cool shot. It's depth of field that that kind of works with that like Citizen Kane uses or Seven Samurai uses so well. So we're looking. The camera goes through the palanquin, and you're looking at something through the palanquin, and then somebody steps in front of you. I just thought that was really, ahead of its time.
Yeah, it was a compositional expertise, I think, which is all over the place in this film. Like the camera work and the framing and composition is generally pretty great all the time, but it maybe is a bit of a precursor to Sergio Leone, and that a lot of times in his films, like he would show us something that looks like it's a wide shot, and then a character walks into frame and it's a close-up on their face, and we're only seeing them from like just above the chin to like right below the top of their forehead. And so we go from like wide shot to extreme close-up without like moving the camera or changing angles, and it's kind of surprising and grabs your attention. But I think that's what Cocteau was doing here in this shot. which obviously it works. Like it's very striking, right?
Very striking.
It catches your attention.
And he does it a couple of times. There's another one, I forget, I think it's the family's having dinner, and there's a candle right in the foreground, and then you look past it, and they're all eating and drinking past it. That I really enjoyed that one, too.
Speaking of shots, I think it's kind of interesting. The first time that we ever see Belle is in a reflection
on the floor,
which is obviously a very unrealistic thing, and maybe that's our first glimpse, if I remember correctly, of like something totally fantastic that can't possibly be real.
Mm-hmm.
And it's associated with Belle, right? Like, but the rest of the family isn't a very good person. Like you said, she's pure of heart, right? And the rest of them aren't. And so everything with them is like very realistic, and there's a bit of realism to it.
Yeah, the family and then the Beast are very the thing shot with the family is very realistic, and then the stuff shot in the castle is very fantastical.
Yeah,
and
then we get this little crossover right there, in like that first moment where we meet Belle. And I don't know if there's anything to read into it. Like, is that a testament or like maybe a bit of a joke about how hard she's working?
Right.
Is that she's polished the floor so much that she can see herself in it? I don't know if that's it, but I just think that's an interesting way.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you can take it that way. You know, that's definitely a thing.
We're with the family for a while, and eventually Belle's father leaves, I think, to go check up on his ships or something like that. And
a ship has come in, and they're going to have lots of money again.
Yeah, and is it on his way home?
Mm-hmm. He finds out that there was no money on the ship, and he on his way home he gets lost and finds the castle.
Yeah, so he finds the Beast Castle. He starts going through. He's exploring it, and that's where we kind of get the lay of the land in that, and at least like we get to see the hallway and into like the dining room, I guess it is. And we start to get introduced to all those like fantastical elements when that happens. Like even when he gets lost, it's because like the trees behind him kind of open like a gate almost to like show him a different path.
Real quick, because I want to talk about a couple of things here, but I did want to talk about the acting was very theatrical, you know, like very as presented on stage. Like we've talked about it before, but the crossover between theater acting into film acting was very different, and this one's very staged, very theatrical. Certain gestures for fright, you know.
Yeah, like what makes theatrical acting versus like film acting?
Well, it's a little less natural. Like film acting can be picked up, like the close-up. Film acting picks up the little details, or can pick up the little details. Whereas theatrical acting, because not only the people in the front row get to see you, but also you have to act to the back of the house as well. So your gestures and the things you do are going to be much larger than if we were filming it. Yeah,
so it'd be more about the body.
Yeah.
And body language comes into effect a little bit more than it does, because in the film we have like the close-up if we need to see what you're thinking.
Yeah, the close-up is the grand gesture playing to the back of the house, you know. When the father first gets to the castle, he's walking up the stairs and he turns, you know, back. It's almost like he can't have his back to the camera, so he turns and looks, you know, out towards there. Not that it's bad. I enjoy it. It's just a different form of acting than what we're used to.
Yeah, I think it fits.
Yeah, and that's true because it's over the top.
I mean, much like the acting in Amarcord. It's a little over the top at times. Like the characters are over the top. The acting and performance is a little exaggerated and extreme. Yeah. It fits that film, and this fits
in a different way
too.
Yeah, that fits in Amarcord, that it fits in here. But yeah, definitely, I agree with you.
And Cocteau wrote plays.
Yeah.
And have some experience in the theater. I think he also had some experience as a set designer in theater. So he does have a theater background.
So the other thing I wanted to talk about was when he first goes into the castle and the arms holding the candelabras, you know, like as they come out and they light. And that was a pretty amazing sequence, and the way that it was all set up just and really surreal. The candelabra. So he walks in, the candelabras go out, and then they light up. But it's obviously done by reverse. So they would blow the candles out, and they would move in. It was actually one long take in that they put in reverse. And I thought that was really interesting.
That whole hallway thing was like one of the things that stuck in my head about this movie after the first time I watched it, and a few years later I was getting ready to watch it again, and those are the images that stuck in my head was actually like the hallway with like the arms holding the candles, and not so much the beast or some of the other like beautiful images and special effects that happen. It just for some reason that just clicks with me.
That hallway,
yeah. So the father goes into the castle and he sits at the table. He gets poured a drink. He drinks it. He falls asleep, right? Mm-hmm. And when he wakes up, he tries to leave, get out of the castle and get out of that whole area and return home. And he sees a rose. And before he left on his trip, Belle had asked him, "Bring me back a rose." Mm-hmm. And so he sees this rose and he picks it. And I guess that picking it brings out the beast, like wherever he is, that gets his attention.
He likes his rose bush.
Yeah. So that's where we first meet the beast. And he comes out and he's smoking, right?
Is he smoking at that point? I mean, so we should say not smoking like a cigarette, but smoking.
Yeah, he's not smoking a cigarette. His body.
It is a French movie, but the beast does not actually smoke.
It's not quite that French. Yeah, but his body has smoke coming off of it. I think.
I don't remember
I remember it having
opening
it there.
Sequence, but it could be. I may have missed it.
But either way, the beast comes out, and that's the first time we get a look at him. And what did you think of his makeup and his costume? We learned that it takes 5 hours to put on, and was obviously a big part of production.
Yeah, there were some close-ups of the beast that I thought were really good. Like you could see the fur on his, like on his hands and stuff. Mm-hmm. From a distance, I wasn't as impressed. But like I think it was when he was dying that you could see close up, and it was just like this fur that was just. It looked like it was his fur, and it was really good. Some of the costumes were kind of crazy. He had these like crazy shoulder pads, but yeah, for the most part, and especially when it was out, this is the forefront of this kind of costuming. I think
I would rather have this sort of thing, which at times it can look a little hokey and a little dated, but for the most part, it holds up pretty well. And there are like those intense close-ups where it really works. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's because it's in a close-up, and like when you're further away, it kind of becomes more clear that it's just a human.
Yeah.
That in some sort of makeup because it's the same shape and stuff. But I would rather have this than like bad CG.
Yeah, if the character had been CGI'd the whole time, some CG is really good. Like Planet of the Apes or Lord of the Rings, like the Andy Serkis stuff is really good. But for the most part, I'm not a big fan.
Yeah, for the record, you're not saying that this could have been CG'd. We know that CG didn't exist at the time.
But yeah, and I think,
well, the new Beauty and the Beast that came out recently that has Hermione from Harry Potter. He's named Emma Watson. Yeah. That has
the Beast is CG the whole time.
CG Beast, I think, at least from what I remember from the trailer. Well, what I really remember from that trailer, actually, because I never watched the film, but is they did this like really closer to lifelike CG animated like candlestick to be like Lumiere and the clock from like the animated version.
Yeah,
and those are just weird because they don't look real because they're CG, but they're trying so hard.
There's this
to make them look real.
The uncanny valley is kind of what they call it, where it's like it's real, but there's just something not quite right about it. Like it doesn't have a soul or whatever.
Yeah.
That it's hard to identify with it.
It's unsettling.
Yeah. And so you're right. I would rather have the sequence in Star Wars Mos Eisley be puppets. than animated. Or I think like Jurassic Park probably did it best in a combination of CG and real effects. You know, like some sort of balance there is what you need. And I don't think the CG is quite there yet. And
most films I've seen of recent times, anything like this, it's like they've got to be CG'd, like creatures or animals in it. Like they're not doing a lot of like that actual like puppet or actual makeup sort of stuff. Even 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri, which I saw last week. Even that, there is a scene with a deer in it, and the deer is CG'd, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. And
well, I think that you have to do like it's cheaper to CG that deer as opposed to getting a real deer and getting that deer to do exactly what you want to do.
Yeah, I don't think you can really train a deer, and I'm not necessarily saying that they should have gotten a real deer,
right? But it's there.
It's just an example. What are you going to do about it? Like I can't. Even though it's circumstance, and I understand why they would do it, it doesn't change the fact that I'm like, it's just unsettling when I see it, and
it doesn't look right.
Yeah.
I think the best example of good CG is when you don't notice it. Like a Beautiful Mind. Remember, he had that character that was in his head, and she was running around with the birds, and the birds don't fly away. Well, they CG'd the birds in there so that the little girl could run around and the birds not fly away. And I didn't even know that. I didn't even realize it until I watched the special features.
A lot of David Fincher's work has CG, and a lot of it has to do with like landscaping and stuff. But like things you can't tell are good. But to bring it back to Beauty and the Beast, it was just kind of like comforting to watch this film again and see that and have it like, even though it's not like sometimes not like super realistic looking, it is real. So I can buy it and get into it more. And I just...
Yeah, the idea that there's an actor
I missed
there.
it. I didn't know how much I missed seeing that until I was kind of watching this film again. So the father makes a deal with the Beast because the Beast wants to kill him because he took his rose, or he was trying to steal the rose. So the Beast is going to kill him. The father like begs his way into letting the Beast, allowing him to like go back home. And he's either has to return in 3 days or he has to send one of his daughters in his place. So he goes home, tells them all the story, and Belle volunteers to go and like take one for the family, which is she's the only one that would have done that. Yeah.
Well, and do you think the Beast knew that? Like he sends, like if somebody's going to come back in his place, that person's going to be a good person, you know?
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought about that.
Like he asks, how many daughters do you have? And he's like, well, send one of them back. And of course, the one that's going to come back will be a good person. Or if he comes back, do you think the Beast was even going to kill him? Like, or was it an empty threat?
I think he was going to kill him.
You think so?
Yeah. I mean, I may be peppered by, that's like our first time of meeting the Beast and we don't know anything about him. And seems very angry and scary. So you're like, I just never questioned like whether or not he's actually going to kill him, or if he's like, even if he's like smart enough to like pull off that sort of plan. Yeah. So Belle volunteers to go. She gets back to the castle and she meets the Beast.
Another amazing sequence of special effects, and like she runs in slow motion.
That shot kind of comes out of nowhere. This like slow motion of her running.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. The first time you see something, it's much more drawn out because you want to recognize the spectacle of it. Let me show you what. And then the second time you see it, it doesn't take as long, and you kind of skip over that part because you've already seen it, right?
So you're saying that he uses slow motion to like slow down that moment for her of like her going
because
through this?
I mean, we don't do the candle opera thing again, but it's a traumatic thing for her, you know. As she runs in.
Yeah, and is this also the part where she's kind of floating?
Well, she's walking. Once she gets up to the top, is that when she floats?
There's a scene where she's kind of walking through, and it might be through a hallway, a different hallway or something.
I think this is the part. So she gets in there. Yeah, she just kind of hovers through.
Yeah, which a lot of these special effects sort of things and like fantasy moments that he pulls off are like relatively simple camera tricks. Like he's not doing anything really crazy. Like he's not doing a lot of like green screen sort of stuff. Nothing like super complicated. It's it's stuff that's as simple as like playing the film in reverse to make the candles look like they lit up on their own. Or in this instance, when she's floating, I read that he had her on like a wooden board, and they just pushed her along. And I mean, sometimes it's those simple things. It's kind of like, to use a modern example, the part in Inception where I think it's Jake Joseph Gordon-Levitt and whoever else are like fighting in that hallway, and that hallway's like rotating, and it seems like this just crazy cool looking special effect moment, but it's just a rotating box and the camera is attached to it, right?
Yeah.
So it
looks like they're spinning around, but what's really happening is it's just rotating.
Yeah, like you think, oh, did they get like wires and like have them like this choreographed movement, and it's like they're just actually responding to gravity. We just can't tell because the camera's locked to like the floor while the actual room is spinning, right? It's like this really simple technique that produces these like crazy looking results. It's always impressive to me. Okay, so when she's in the castle, she meets the Beast for the first time. I think he's pretty scary. She's pretty scared, understandably.
So there's actually another reading, and I didn't pick up on this at first, and I only picked it up on reading articles about it, but that her reaction to the Beast, she hasn't seen him yet, but her reaction to the Beast isn't fright, it's orgasmic, to actually use Roger Ebert's word from the article that I read, and that she is playing with the knife in such a way that it's a subtle, sexual metaphor. Did you pick up on any of that, or what are your thoughts?
No, because I was viewing it as a child.
So, and that's an interesting thing, because they talk about how, well, it's presented for children, but then are these metaphors, did they do these things on purpose? Like, she's in her room and the Beast is like, shut your door, like that's about sex, right? Like when you think about it again.
It could be, but isn't that, he's smoking in that scene, right? Like that's after a scene where he's gotten kind of upset and he's run off on his own, and it's obvious that he's killed like a creature, like an animal, right? And part of that opening crawl, it says that like when the Beast kills the creature, like hunts and kills, it causes him to smoke. Right?
And he's smoking there.
And he's smoking in that scene, and it also says that this causes him shame, right? And I always took it as like the smoke is a sign that he's just like gone and killed, and him hunting and killing like a beast, because he is a man, right? He's been transformed into a beast.
Yeah, I'm not sure that actually gets explained in this movie.
Well, it doesn't, and we can kind of jump to the end of the film.
Oh, yeah. So that
in the end of the film, somebody else gets turned into the Beast when he gets turned into a human, or back into a human. So I think he's embarrassed by these like animal instincts of hunting, and the smoke and stuff is the like physical sign that he's gone off and given into like his beastly
he's both
ways.
Beast and man, and he's this duality, and he's ashamed of this beast part of himself.
Yeah, so that's what I took it as when he's like shut the door, because like he doesn't want her to look at him in this like post hunting state. I'm sure you could read it the other way, but
it's just an interesting thought. I'm not sure. Maybe on a second, but you've seen it 3 times, so like, and you've never exactly.
No, but I've also never had that idea planted in my head until you've told me about it here, and like now I'm interested to watch it again and kind of keep an eye out for those things. I've always just watched it previously and never really read into it more than just like watching it as a fairy tale, and actually kind of getting enamored by all the technique and the effects in it, which is something that happened to this. Like, when we've been watching the films for this podcast, I take notes while I'm watching it of things to talk about, and like my notes for this film were like significantly smaller than the other films, because I kind of just got like drawn into the world and kind of visuals, enamored with it. And no, I wasn't even thinking about a lot of the scenes in that way. One thing that I noticed that is the contrast of the Beast to Belle's family, like her new world versus the old world that she came from. on top of like the fantastic thing, but the Beast personality is completely the opposite of the family, right? Like he's self-deprecating.
Mm-hmm.
He's very humble. He shows respect for her because he says he's like, I'm not gonna make you look at me a lot. You're not gonna have to interact with me if you don't want to.
Once every day at 7 o'clock, I'm gonna ask you to marry me.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna ask that until you say yes, which.
Yeah, which is kind of weird. But yeah, he views himself. He's ashamed of himself, and he's humble to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
And the family is like not that at all. And like he understands. He's like, I'm ugly, hideous. Like, I know that it would pain anyone to have to look at me. And so I guess that's one of the things that maybe draws Belle to him. I would assume is that he's recognizing his own problems and his.
Well, he's sympathetic,
flaws.
And it's not even Belle; it's us. So he's a sympathetic character in a movie with only one other sympathetic character, essentially. So it draws us to him as well.
Just one other point on that is that when she's at home, she's doing the housework, and when we first meet her, and she's looking at the floor, and she's on her knees and scrubbing, and everyone seems to be fine. Like no one. Mm-hmm. No one doesn't want her to do that. Everyone's fine with her.
Except the one that wants to marry her, the friend.
Yeah, the friend, but her family, they don't have any thought about her being down on her knees working. And as soon as she gets to her knees to like beg the Beast, he like pulls her up almost. It's mm-hmm. like, no, get up. You don't kneel before me. Like I
should be the one kneeling before you.
And I think that is Cocteau, or that's one of the reasons that Cocteau made the family so extremely like horrible and unpleasant. Because now the Beast, who when we first see him when he meets the dad, is like, it's a scary thing. It's a creature. He's threatening to kill the dad. But once we kind of get to know him and see that he's everything the family isn't, like we start to feel that sympathy for him. Like mm-hmm. playing those two against each other was smart.
So then she looks in the mirror and she sees her sick dad, which the Beast had given her the mirror earlier in the movie. Something
it's
in the house,
her room.
Yeah, something in the house whispers to her and is like, this will show you what's in your heart. Did you have anything you wanted to say about that?
I thought that was an interesting concept. I don't know that comes from the fairy tale. Like I kind of jotted it down in my notes and mm-hmm. That mirror thing is interesting. Like maybe it's gonna like come back later, which it does. I just said like the whole concept of that mirror is interesting, and we get some really funny things out of it. Like later, she goes home. Like actually, so the Beast lets her go home. She asks him like, "Let me go home for a week. I want to see my dad. He's dying." And he lets her go home. And while she's home, she has the mirror with it, right?
Yeah.
And you get the moment where like the sisters look in the mirror, and it shows them like their heart, and they're just like,
one's a monkey.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the other one is just old and wrinkled. Well, so real quick, so since you brought it up, so she's given the glove to transport immediately home. I want to talk about that sequence a little bit because that may be my favorite sequence, the one that stuck out. So she puts the glove on. So even though we can spot like the trick of how they did it, it's still beautiful. Like she emerges, she puts the glove on and she emerges from the wall in her house, and it's just like her dress is kind of flowing, and that was just
it's almost like a flower blooming, mm-hmm. right? It's just very beautiful. It's like that's just what it resembles, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and obviously that's like just reversing the film mm-hmm. and playing it backwards. Yeah, it's a beautiful image and just a really interesting way of doing it, because you could just cut and she's there, right?
Yeah, you just cut and then
yeah, or you could like shoot the shot without her in it, and then shoot a shot with her in it and cross dissolve those, and she like fades in and appears, right? And that's something we've probably seen 100 times.
This is a much more creative way of doing it, and like you said, there's that the easy way is just to record the shot with her without her in it, and then record it with her in it, and you have she's magically there, and this is so much more creative. And they do later on do that.
Yeah, they do it when she has to transport and she gets on the bed.
Yeah. But this shot's just really great. I really enjoyed that.
One of the things interesting about when the Beast lets her visit home is that, he's worried that she's just getting him to agree to do it and she's just never going to come back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And contrary to what you would think that, like, if you're worried that someone's trying to pull one over on you and leave and never come back, you would give them an incentive to return, or give them something that, like, almost requires them to, like, have to return. Like, like maybe you would take something from them. Like, I'm going to hold this hostage and you're not getting it back until you come back. But he kind of does the opposite. He gives her
a reason,
a key
to stay away for longer.
Yeah, he gives her a key and says, like, this key goes to this building. Here it is. Like, there are treasures that'll make you, like, unimaginably rich in here. It's what makes me rich. And if you leave and you don't come back, I will die from grief, 1. 2, that once I'm gone, feel free to go in here and use this key to get in and become rich. So all she has to do to become unimaginably rich, solve all of her family's problems, is to not return. Right?
Until he's dead. So let me ask you this. Knowing how it ends, and the way it ends is the friend crawls in, they're going to rob the place, right? And there's fairies inside, and he gets shot and killed and turns into the Beast. So, knowing how that ends, with the fairies in there, do all the fairies die with him? So, like, the security of that place, once he's died, is gone, and she can go in there safely? Or if she goes in there, is she going to get shot by the fairies and punished?
I don't know. I think...
Or am I thinking too much?
No, I don't think so. I think his love for Belle and the way that he treats Belle leads me to think that he wouldn't dupe her like that.
Or is it just an illogical thing in the story? Like, they didn't necessarily explain it.
And maybe that was it. Maybe there is a bit of like, yeah, if you go and you don't come back, like, I'm going to get you in the end. I think that's kind of funny.
I don't think that's actually... I would say you're right. The Beast doesn't have that in him. I don't think he wants to hurt her at all, even after he's dead. He has no ill will. He's like, look, I understand if you don't come back. I'm an ugly guy, but I really would appreciate it if you did, because I don't want to die. Yeah. So
yeah, it's an interesting choice. It's opposite of, like, what you would expect. Mm-hmm. So when she's home, she's visiting her dad, and life is kind of as normal. Like, we kind of see a little bit of what's going on before she goes back, and, like, they're kind of doing exactly what they were before she left, and, like,
they're a little bit worse off now. Like, since she's been gone, they've taken all the furniture because the brother had a bunch of debts that he had to pay off. Yeah. So they've taken all the furniture, and the sisters are actually working with air quotation marks around it. They're doing some work, complaining about it the whole time. Yes, but
life is, as it were, I guess, in the sense that the characters are all the same. They're unchanged. Right, yeah. They don't seem to have any emotion other than the father. They don't seem to care.
They're not that upset that Belle's gone.
That Belle left, yeah. And as far as they know, never ever coming back, right? Which I think is just one more of those, like, they put that up against the Beast in the way he was. That, like, if you leave and don't come back, I'll die.
Yeah. And the rest of the family except for the dad, this is basically the same way.
There's this interesting bit that I don't understand where it came from or how to explain it, or if it was explained somewhere and I missed it, but when she's with the father, she starts crying, and when she cries, like, her tears, like, I guess, like, kind of freeze, turn to diamonds.
Yeah, I think, from what I understood, it was the Beast's gift to the father, so that he could be financially stable again. It was I may be misremembering, but I think that's what it was, or, like, at least that's the way the father took it.
Which is nice. What a lovely beast to do those things, but just an interesting image and a really weird thing. Like, part of me, I was like, it seems like it might hurt if it, like, freezes.
Yeah.
Hardens as it's coming out. I don't know. I was probably thinking about the wrong things and focusing on the wrong stuff in that, but it seems weird.
Yeah.
So while she's there, the man who's kind of been pursuing her back home, like before she left, finds out about her key that he gave her, and so that guy and her brother steal the key, and then they decide they're going to go.
No, it was actually the sister stole the key. Like that's when they did the onion trick. So they decide they can't cry, so they get onions and they rub them on their eyes so it looks like they've been crying, or the one girl does, and she starts crying and is like, "Oh, don't leave." And then the other sister steals a key.
Yeah. So the family, I guess, collectively hatches this plot to steal the key. They're going to go kill the Beast and take his treasures, and then they'll all be rich, right? And so they go off to do that. Belle realizes what's going on, or it's time to go back to visit the Beast. So she goes back and realizes that she's lost the key. And as you said, the guy who's trying to marry her breaks into this room where all the treasures are, and he gets shot and turned into the Beast, right?
Well, right. So she comes back, and the Beast is laying there dying, and it's intercut with him and the brother breaking into the treasure room, and the Beast is dying. He's like, and she begs him, like, no, just rally. You can come back from this. And he's like, if I were a man, maybe I could. And then, the friend gets shot, and then
he falls down. He turns into the Beast, and
the Beast is dead at this point, and so she's mourning him. And then all of a sudden, he pops up, and he is the friend. Yeah,
he's the friend. They have the same actor playing the friend, who was the same actor playing the Beast in costume as well, right? Yeah. So you have the same actor playing the human form of the Beast, the actual Beast, and the friend from back home, who's not a very good person, who's been trying to marry her the whole time, and which is pretty interesting to think about. So what did you make of that?
Well, so when the Beast first turns into the man, she's like, well, where's my Beast? Like I actually had that reaction in the original Beauty and the Beast. Like I was like, I miss the Beast. Like the human form of Beast is not as cool as the Beast was, for whatever reason, or you're not used to that guy, so you don't trust him or whatever.
He's not the person who you just spent the last hour and a half getting to know and like learning to love and like or be sympathetic towards.
I don't know what it says. Like, is there something more meaningful in that casting?
Does the disappointment come from the fact that he looks like this guy and reminds us of this guy that we've seen and like not liked the rest of the movie? Or is it supposed to be like just him not being the Beast at all is disappointing, and like becoming a man, and like it's not the person that she fell in love with. It's not the Beast that she had grown attached to.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure.
If it's supposed to be that the Beast transforming from what you fell in love with into something else is a disappointment, which it is. Like, she doesn't seem all that.
Not at first. She doesn't like
excited.
Run up and hug him. At first she's a little off put. And then she's like, I can get to know this guy.
Yeah, if it's supposed to be that sort of thing, like, I think we're distracted by the fact of it being like the same actor. But I don't think that's a misstep that Cocteau would make.
Right. The Beast asked her if she was in love with that man, the friend, and she says that yes, she is in love with him.
Yeah. So do you think there was some choice in how he ended up transforming? I
mean, I guess that could be the part of the key. Like he was gave the key and knew that. I don't know. I think we're kind of reading. I think it's a simple story, and I think reading a lot more into it can.
I think we're hitting the most complex thing in what is a simple story.
Yeah.
That is, for the most part, a lot of like visual awe, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of stuff to look at and be impressed by, and just like enjoy the whole production.
Yeah. Visual spectacle.
Then we get to this point of like, what? It's the same actor, and like, or not the same actor, but it's like it's the same person. It looks just like the other guy, and now she seems like slightly disappointed, and I don't know.
Is it saying something about the Beast? So if it's the same character, do we all need a little bit of animal like tendencies in us? Like is it
making all men sort of the same, and that we have the Beast, we have the man, and like maybe she's not totally happy with the Beast because he's hairy and an animal and not a man, but like her personality or his personality is what she falls for. But he doesn't have the looks of the other guy. So maybe she's dissatisfied either way, because it's not, you have the guy who represents like man and human, and then you have the Beast, and you need like a mix of both. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, kind of. Or either that, or she's just really superficial. So she's like, I won't take you when you're ugly, even though your personality is super amazing. But if you're a handsome guy, thumbs up, I'll go for it.
Yeah. I mean, that's it for me. I think for talking about the film, I think it's a really fun watch. It's like, as we've said many, many times, it's beautiful. Like, I think you could watch this film with the sound off.
Yeah. Oh, actually, one of the things I meant to, Philip Glass actually did an opera. The Criterion edition allows you to choose the Philip Glass opera to go along with this movie. Like, he wrote a whole opera.
It's like an alternative audio track. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I would really be interested in that.
I think it would work, because that's...
Yeah. And it's subtitled anyways, so you're going to have to...
Sure. Do we get the subtitles still when we do the opera version, I wonder?
I don't know.
I don't think... I wouldn't want them. I would just want the opera to do its thing and not have it tainted by subtitles.
But that's an interesting thing. Visually spectacular. Visually, like, the things that they use are... You can see them being used today. Tricks that they use in Lord of the Rings were used in this film. Just a really fun film, like for a rainy day.
Yeah. And again, the rain has been off and on heavy and not so heavy. So if there's inconsistencies or if at any point it's super annoying, sorry. Chris, do you want to tell them what next week's film is?
Next week's film is Spine Number 7, A Night to Remember, by Roy Ward Baker. This is the other Titanic film, the one without Leonardo DiCaprio. The places you can find this is Filmstruck, $10.99 a month. It's available on iTunes and YouTube, Amazon.
Yeah, anywhere you can rent films.
Yeah, except for Blockbuster.
You can't rent films at Blockbuster unless you live in like Alaska or wherever that last one is. This is actually, I've not ever seen this one before, so
yeah, neither have I.
Looking forward to watching it. I found the DVD of it for like $5 at a used store, and I bought it forever ago, and I just haven't ever gotten around to watch it. So
actually, you know what? I think I watched this I read the book in high school, and then I watched parts of the film. It's been so long that I don't remember much of it, but I think I did watch it in high school on VHS.
Cool. We're looking forward to it, and so let's move into the top three.
All right,
Our top three this week is a fun one, I think.
It's definitely going to be interesting.
Going along with the fairy tale fantasy theme of Beauty and the Beast, we thought we would do our fantasy picks for Criterion Collection, like films that we would like to be in the Criterion Collection, but probably would never make it except in our wildest dreams, right? Like, so
this is just any movie that you just... it's fantasy, so just any movie that you really love, that you want to see, and
so maybe Transformers 3 would never make it into Criterion Collection, but if one of us loved that film and would just really, it'd be neat to see it in there.
If you pick Transformers 3, I quit the podcast.
Uh-oh. Okay. So go ahead, Chris. Give us your first.
All right. So my first one is Back to the Future. I would love to see the trilogy of Back to the Future in the Criterion Collection.
So you do a whole trilogy?
Yeah, it'd be a whole box set. Yeah.
Trilogy? I have a trilogy on mine, actually.
Do you?
Yeah.
I'd like to see that. I mean, the first movie is the best, of course, but I would like to see that.
So why do you think it would never make it? Or why it's very unlikely that it wouldn't make it.
Well, it's very unlikely, and I think that's mainly to do with the rights, because whoever does own the rights is making money off of it still, so it doesn't need to go to Criterion,
Yeah, well, I mean, so you look at a film like Breakfast Club ends up on Criterion.
Yeah. Well, that's true. Maybe I don't know exactly how the rights work, so maybe they're splitting, like
Yeah.
So I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. I think it's a hallmark film.
I think it could be
of
eventually
the 80s and one of the most important, maybe not most important, but like one of the biggest like time travel films that there are out there, and maybe in some ways that merits getting on.
Yeah, I would like to see it though. I'd like if you could get it, the Eric Stoltz cut, like the
clips from what they shot with him.
Yeah. Just for those who don't know, Eric Stoltz was originally going to play Marty McFly. They got through like about 2 or 3 weeks of filming, and they replaced him with
Michael J. Fox.
Michael J. Fox, that's it.
Cool. Well, my first one, is it cheating if I say my film? The film that I made?
That actually crossed my mind too. No, I think you can say your film.
Okay. Well, I would put my film on there because then my wildest dreams, my film that I made will end up.
I think it needs to have a release first.
Sure. Yeah. It's not released where anyone can watch it yet. And maybe one day. That is my wildest dream, right? That the film that I made would end up on Criterion. I would love to be able to do like a director's commentary and talk about it, which, I could do, but on my own, but no one would listen to it.
You just put it up on the internet like a podcast, and you just have to record them both. I guess nobody can watch the movie though, so it's tough for right now.
Yeah, not yet. One day.
One day.
Okay.
My second film. I really like this movie when I first saw it, and it's not that. It's an okay movie. I would say it's like about a 7. Iron Man.
Sure. Okay.
And mainly, the reason I picked it was because I think the current culture of films that we're in is started with Iron Man. I mean, maybe it's started way back with Superman and stuff like that, but the current one was brought on by Iron Man, and that has shaped our current film climate. So I think that's why I would pick it.
I think so. Was that one of the first like really successful?
No, I mean I wouldn't say
critically successful.
Superman. Oh, Superman was Superman and Batman, but this is the first like Marvel movie that was really successful. I mean, they had done Hulk movies before, and it's really the one that sets up that they're going to do this larger universe.
So my second one would also be a box set, but not a trilogy. But I think Arrested Development, having that on Criterion would be really fun. I would be super jazzed just to see the cover art that they would come up with.
That would be awesome. The cover art is worth it alone.
Yeah.
Somebody...
That's all I really want.
Somebody make an Arrested Development cover art for us, please.
Yeah, please. But I think that, doing some special features and more commentary. I think there is some commentary on the DVDs, but more commentary would be interesting. I think you could probably do it without the 4th season that's on Netflix if you wanted to.
They're supposed to be making another one too.
I'm not that worried about that one, but those first 3 are amazing, and I do think that when it came out, it was in the midst of when the laugh track was still king, and it was an early sitcom that had no laugh track. It also was doing handheld camera and sort of camera work that is now standard in sitcoms like The Office and Parks and Rec and
the single
Modern
camera
Family
setup.
Yeah, and it was handheld, and they would do
style.
zooms. So they shot documentary style, even though they don't have people acknowledging the camera in Arrested Development like they do in other ones. But I just think it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would buy it.
I would buy it for sure. All right, so my last one is, I picked 2. It kind of goes along this, Jaws and Star Wars, because that also changed. So really this is, Jaws and Star Wars is what allowed Iron Man, the big summer blockbuster, changed film forever. And both Jaws and Star Wars are pretty amazing. I think
they're both important films in film history, and I don't think you can argue against that.
Jaws for sure could go in there, just on its own merits, without having changed film history like it did. I think that's a really good one.
I don't know what more special features that we could get out of Star Wars.
That we haven't already seen.
I think probably they're pretty exhaustive. We would get...
what I would want to see from the Star Wars? The original...
the unaltered.
Yeah, the unaltered cut.
Yeah. That might be the one thing we get. Like the Brazil box set where we have the 2 different cuts of Brazil.
Right.
And yeah, that would actually be pretty cool. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm on board now.
All right. And for any of these, if you want to make the cover art, I'd like to see that.
Last one. It's a film I've already talked about before on these top 3s, and I'm gonna bring it back up because I love it so much. The Big Hit. Mark Wahlberg, Lou Diamond Phillips, Christina Applegate, Elliot Gould, just everyone. It's amazing. It's again, it's this this sort of satire. It's smarter than people give it credit for film, and I think you can find plenty of people to write cool essays for a booklet, and like I think it actually might just be kind of funny to have to get like maybe some sort of film historian on John Woo or
talking about how
to do a commentary track over Big Hit if we can't get the director. I know the director is he's an Asian guy, so I'm not sure if he actually speaks English. I really have no idea. I don't even know his name. But having some film historian on John Woo like do this commentary track for The Big Hit, or someone writing a very critical essay, I'll do it. I'll write a critical essay for the booklet. Like, hit me up.
All right, I'm going to have to watch this movie sometime this week with conjunction of Night to Remember. I'm going to watch Big Hit, and we'll talk about it next week.
That makes me so happy. Don't let me down.
I'm going to watch it. That's going to be our topic. But not.
Do you need to borrow my? I have a copy in my car.
Oh yeah, I'm taking it.
You can borrow.
I'll take it home.
Okay,
yeah.
Done. All right, so that's it for today's episode. As always, want to thank you, the listener, for listening. We also want to thank Jake Wagner Russell, who created our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bopscotch.
Yeah, absolutely. So any feedback that you have that you want to give us, any mistakes we made or things we did right, let us know. We usually have a thing up under the /Criterion Reddit thread.
Yeah, we post every episode in there,
Yeah.
and we do get some comments and feedback and some
Absolutely.
interaction. We kind of talk about top 3s, like people give us their top 3s, and we always reply and talk about them too. So feel free to go there. You can also go to our Facebook at facebook.com/casuallycriterion podcast. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at casualcriterion, or you can just email us directly at casuallycriterion@gmail.com.
We actually got a bunch of reviews this week, so we wanted to make sure that we thank everybody that reviewed us and rated us 5 stars. We don't have anything less than that yet. Yeah, thanks so much, guys. We really appreciate it, and so make sure you watch Night to Remember, and we will see you next week. But for now, goodbye.
Bye-bye.